Welcome to the Rich Mind Podcast.
Hit record and say, hey, here we go. You ready? And it's like, well, no, I'm not ready. Well, too late. Hit record. And we're back, folks. We're back. Welcome. We're going to talk about some relationships today. We don't have a whole lot of notes. We were just talking about that before we hit record. But at the same time, this is super important as well. Goes along with that be, do, have in the previous conversation that we just had. Who you're being. I was telling Greg before we hit record to share a little bit with you, a little bit more background even with myself. I wasn't modeled from my parents that relationships were important. Now, I'm not saying that they didn't. My parents were great in their relationship. I feel like they had, a great bond. But as far as like growing relationships outside of the house, even with the immediate family, it wasn't something that was taught to me as being an important thing. So I've struggled with that in my adulthood to reach out, to be friends, to help other people. That's been a struggle of mine that I've had to work through. And so I'm super excited about this relationship conversation we're going to talk about, because if, you might be struggling with those types of things as well. The whole introvert, extrovert. I'm definitely an introvert. And, a lot of times you'll think that, if somebody's got a podcast or out here talking on the internet or whatever, you'd say they've got to be an extrovert. And it's absolutely, that is not the case at all. I am 100% an introvert. I would say I try to push my boundaries a little bit and to be a little bit more outspoken, meeting folks. But at the same time, I'm definitely more of an introvert. So anyways, Greg, what are your thoughts on that so far?
Yeah, I can agree with you 100%. I am on the introverted side, I would say. I think I have exercised the muscle a little bit of, like you said, like pushing yourself to maybe more of the middle of that spectrum, or maybe a little bit on the extroversion side when needed. But yeah, I think my natural default is probably introvert as well. But yeah, I mean, there's just a topic about relationships. Obviously, we all have relationships, whether we want them or not. That's a different story. But kind of going back to last episode, we all have a choice, right? And we have a choice to choose who we're in a relationship with, how that relationship kind of develops, boundaries in the relationships. There's a lot of things that we can kind of dive into. And yeah, and we're going to relate it to, like we talked about, family relationships, romantic relationships, and then obviously business and friendship. So we're probably not going to cover all of that in the time we have here, but relationships covers a lot of areas that we can really dive into.
So I've mentioned this in previous episodes, and I'll mention it again. So as I was becoming an entrepreneur myself, as I was trying to build my business, as I was trying to create content even, right? I had to figure out how I could add value to others. And that's really where the relationship starts, is it's not showing up to get, it's showing up to give. Once again, that wasn't modeled to me. I didn't know that. As simple as that might sound, and as simple as it is in my own mind as I'm saying it out loud today, back just 15 years ago, let's say, I did not know that. So I always thought that I was always needing to get things from other folks, right? I always thought that, you show up for work and you're getting things out of folks to do a job, or your boss is trying to get you to do things, right? That was just my mindset. And it wasn't obviously a very productive mindset. I've had to flip that on its head. And I think you've got a quote brought up, Greg, as far as from the great Zig Ziglar that we want to definitely share with you as well. But these types of quotes, it's helped me kind of flip that on its head and realize that when I show up to give without anything in response, it's like I'm not looking for anything in return. When I just simply show up to give and add value to other people, like you today, the listener, that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to add value into your life without having anything in response, or I'm not expecting anything in return. That's when the relationships have grown. Any thoughts on that, how that's been for you? And then, yeah, share that quote. I kind of teased it there a little bit, but yeah, share that quote as well. But any thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I can relate this to, my personal experience in being an entrepreneur. It was actually was 10 years ago this year that I started my realtor business. I became a realtor. This is when I was back living in Arizona. And I joined a networking group shortly after. It was called BNI, Business Networking International. And their tagline is Givers Gain. And it's
Givers Gain.
Givers Gain. So
I like that.
It goes, it's very short, very sweet, and it's very impactful. And it goes along with the Zig Ziglar quote that you kind of teased, and I'll just, jump into it now.
Yeah, please.
he says, you can have everything in life you want if you will just help enough other people get what they want. So kind of goes hand in hand with giver's gain, where you show up to the meeting, you're not there to get business necessarily. You're there to, listen to other people, what they're looking for, who their ideal client is, and then, think about who can I give them as, far as business goes. And then in the long run, that business might come back to you. They might recommend somebody who, gives you business or a relationship. So it's that giver's gain and helping enough other people get what they want. Then all of a sudden things will kind of start falling in your lap, but you lead with giving, not with what can I get out of this meeting? What can I get out of Randy today? No,
Right.
It's what can we give to our audience?
Yes, exactly. And I mentioned I wasn't really modeled that growing up. That was something that I had to learn on my own. How about for you? Was that something that was, did you have to learn that on your own, or were you kind of shown that or taught that growing up?
Yeah, I don't want to say I didn't learn it growing up, but I don't remember a specific example or teaching of it. I think the first time I really jumped into that was 10 years ago at that meeting of, oh, wow, as an entrepreneur, this is how entrepreneurs act. That's their identity, which we talked about in the last episode, the
Right.
being. So if I want to be a successful entrepreneur, I too have to give and, really listen to what people need and want in their business. So I think that was the first time that I really stumbled upon that. And then the Zig Ziglar quote came for me after that. So I would attribute that to 10 years ago at that B&I meeting, honestly.
Yeah. So that quote, and it's a fantastic quote. You can have everything in the world that you want if you help everybody else get what they want. And I know I butchered that. It wasn't exactly the exact quote,
No, it's
but
good.
it's the idea, right? The concept of it. If you show up to add value first, you'll get everything that you want when you help others get what they want first. So even talking about a personal relationship, just kind of maybe tying it in with a little bit of a story for myself, is that when I discovered that, so I've been married 28 years, going on 29.
Woo!
Yeah,
Congrats.
long time. And it's been good. So once again, so it's almost like I have a life before personal development and then after personal development, right? So the life before personal development was more of I always felt like I needed to get. It's like, what is she going to do for me? What is it? I was more selfish. I was more, I don't know. I just wasn't really focused on, at least not all the time, right? It's not that I was negative and selfish all the time. That's not my point. It's just I was less looking to help her become the person that she meant to be. When I started to discover these things, once again, I used myself as the guinea pig, right? As I would learn something, and I didn't really know if it was true or not, I would try it out. And that's how I would start out, right? It would start off with my wife. And I just started to give her more. And I don't even just mean physically. I just mean more attention. I would listen. I would try to do things for her in advance without her even asking. It's led into so many different things, right? But at the same time, it's so as I have done that, our relationship has gotten so much better. Into obviously now we're 28 years, and obviously it's going to go on a lot more. It's been had I not taken control and focused on that relationship piece of giving, who knows? I'm not saying we would have gotten divorced, but we definitely would not be as happy as we are today with each other. We look forward to being with each other because we know, because she's learned how to reciprocate that as well, right? She'll give. We'll look to give and help each other, and that is in turn just made everything so much better. Any thoughts on that, Greg?
Yeah, no, I love the personal aspect of it, and I can relate, to my own wife. We haven't been married quite as long, but
28, 29, 30 years? No, not 3 decades?
no, not there yet. But we'll get there in time.
Yeah,
But
exactly.
I can definitely relate to kind of having that giving piece, and like you said, it's not like giving her a present or giving her
No,
this,
yeah, it's not always physical.
Yeah, it's not. Sometimes it is, but that's not what we're talking about here.
Right.
We're really talking about like you said, giving her my attention instead of being on my phone and having a conversation with her, just flipping my phone over and be like, all right, what do we need to talk about here? And honestly, sometimes it's giving her, the honest truth about how I'm feeling about maybe our relationship or an aspect of it. And sometimes it's not easy. You don't want to have those conversations of like, oh, well, this might not land well, or this might, you know what I mean? But it's like, well, it's on my mind, and I want to share that with her. to really give her the information of what's going on so we can work on it together, even though it might not be, it might be a little muddy. So
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It's just going and working through it, right? Figuring it out as you go. That's how it's been for me. Once again, you test things, you see if that works. And so I have realized that the more, so sometimes I do fall back into my old habits of, for me, right? I'm just thinking about me. What am I going to get? What am I going to do? And when I fall into those habits, even still to this day, things don't seem to go real well. And so once again, it's a trigger. It's like I realize it. I can take control of it. I can make a different decision, and then I can get a different response, which then gets me a different result. And so once again, it's that being piece for yourself within your own relationship with yourself that helps then with the relationships that you've got on the outside as well. So you mentioned about going to a networking event. And so the question or the thought that I had in my mind, I've been to those networking events as well, right? And you always might not be the accurate word to use, but a lot of times you'll run into folks that you can just see it. You can just feel it, that they're just there to get, you know what I mean? They're there to get the business, that they're there to conquer whatever it is, right? Tell me about that. Have you had those experiences as well?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, definitely in my realtor days and those networking events, there are people that are there just to, suck your connections out of you and not really give you anything.
Exactly.
Some of them are really blunt about it. Some of them aren't as much, but you can definitely, like you said, you have that vibe of, am I really getting along with this person? Are they coming at me with like pure intentions, or are they really trying to just, get my referral and then just never talk to me again? So yeah, I mean, those are the things that you kind of have to gauge. And sometimes you have a gut feeling about somebody, and then on the flip side, you can definitely tell when somebody's there to connect you with other people.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like for me, it's like, I can recognize that a lot easier because I don't know, it's just genuine. And I can I have that gut feeling about somebody like, oh, he or she they really want to help me and they're not really expecting me to hand them a referral on the back end, which I will, try to do or do my best to make that connection. But yeah, just having that gut feeling of, being, a giver or a taker, I think is very valuable.
So when you have that feeling, because I get those feelings as well, right? Once you start investing in these relationships, get yourself out into environments with different people, different things, like you said, you start to get gut feelings. How does that make you feel? I know how it makes me feel as far as when you run across somebody that is just there to take versus give. You mentioned how it makes you, really feel calm, really feel good when you run into somebody that's really there to give. Does it turn you off? I mean, what are your thoughts when you run into somebody like that?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a turnoff for sure, but I think it's kind of a relief as well because you know which bucket they're in. So, you know what I mean? Like,
I never really thought about that. It's like, yeah, you can just like check it off, right? It's like, yeah, not really necessarily. It's not that you can't communicate with that person, but you just might not go into a deeper relationship with them, right? Is that what you mean?
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say. Like when you put them in that bucket of, oh, they're probably just a taker, it's not that I'm never going to help them, or if I didn't have a good connection for them, I wouldn't give it to them. That's not what I'm saying at all, because you do show up at those meetings to give value and provide value. Whether or not you're going to get that on the back end, that's not really my business, but it might be a little bit more of a different approach. If I know somebody is just a taker, and I have a connection for them, it might be a shorter conversation, or maybe, I don't want to say less heartfelt, but maybe just more blunt and to the point. Whereas if I'm really connecting with somebody at an event and I have a connection for them, it would be more of a, hey, let's get to know each other. Let's build that rapport. Oh, by the way, I really have a great connection for you that I think will, be a great fit for your service. It's just more fun that way, building that relationship, knowing that it could probably sustain the test of time as, opposed to the other one where it'll probably fizzle out based on my gut feeling.
So when you were first starting out in your realtor journey, what were some of the things that you went to this networking event, right? Tell me about that. Maybe help the folks out there today as far as like they realize that they need to get themselves out there a little bit more, start communicating, start connecting with more individuals. Do you have any tips as far as like questions to ask? How do you engage with folks for the very first time when you first meet them? What's kind of your secret? Because you're great at it. I mean, obviously we've built a relationship, right? And it really wouldn't have started if it wouldn't have been for you. So yeah, I'm just curious because I would assume that it's intentional. It's not just something that happens. You think about it, right? So yeah, just curious if there's any tips you can leave folks today.
Yeah. So I know in the beginning when I started my networking for the realtor business, I was definitely, I don't want to say nervous, but I was self-conscious about just being in a room with 30 other, entrepreneurs. And I didn't know if they were more successful, less successful. Now I really don't care because I've gotten over that, comparison kind of thing. But
there's another episode right there, the comparison game. We'll talk about that in the future too. Yeah, that's a tough one.
Yeah, no, it definitely is. But I think honestly, just to build relationships with people, you kind of, first of all, you had that gut feeling of like, are they on the same page? You can kind of tell, for me anyway, about like their cadence or the way they speak. I kind of curse every once in a while, so I'm very casual with not on the podcast, but so
try to keep it clean, folks. Yeah, we're not cursing out here on the podcast.
That's right. But in real life, it happens. And even at networking events, I just try to be myself. Not that I'm like vulgar or anything like that, but when I get to know somebody, it's like talking to a friend, not a business associate necessarily. And I think that's what's really worked for me is just being authentic and then being really curious about people. Because when you're in a networking event, at least this one, there was only one profession per person. So there can be only one realtor, one mortgage loan officer. So you have some people that were selling some really interesting products, different businesses that I've never heard of, and you just get real curious about, I remember there was one person who sold promotional products that realtors would give away, like, pens and staplers or whatever, and you put your logo on them. And I remember asking, we were in like a group setting, and I remember asking, I was like, what's the craziest product that you had somebody come to you and say, hey, I want to put, my logo on a hot air balloon or something like that. And another girl who was listening, she's like, wow, that's a really good question. And then I honestly forget what his answer was, but it was like, yeah, what's the craziest thing? Not like, oh, can you put my logo on a pen? Yes. Okay, cool. I'll order 50. It was just,
right.
Like, tell me a crazy story about, like, I love when people ask me, like, what's your craziest realtor story? Because I've had like one or two. One of them I probably couldn't tell on the podcast, but
because you're opening that up, I'm going to ask you. I'm just out of curiosity now.
Yeah, so I couldn't really go into that one, but it was a really cool story of like just the situation that we ran into, and me and my client were like, oh, this is what this house is and does. Let's get out of here, right? It was one of those, but it was like I would have, when somebody asked me that question, I'm like, oh, I got a good story for you. So it goes both ways when you're asking that curious question and then receiving it as well.
Love that. So one thing I was taught as I started to realize that I need to get better at the relationship piece is that everyone's number one subject. Do you know what everyone's number one subject they have for themselves? I don't know if I worded that correctly or not. Does that stir up any answers for you?
The number one topic.
The number one thing the number one topic everybody wants to talk about. Maybe that's a better way to put it.
I'd probably say themselves.
Themselves. Yeah. So that's where if you can start with just the questions about themselves, right? Whether it's family, whether it's business, it can be anything, right? Just starting off and leading into the question or leading in with questions about themselves. You'll be surprised. Number one, how honest and open people will be with you, but then how engaging it will be back and forth, right? It really opens up that conversation. Like you just said, Greg, is like, you just don't lead in with a yes or no type of question. It's like, it's tell me about that. Or even if they do respond back with a short answer, it's like, well, tell me more about that or this or whatever it is that you're trying to communicate with. That's been my experience as I've gotten myself out of my own comfort zone and into rooms and into conferences with different people, is that I try to just simply ask questions. And one thing, and Greg's made note of it, and I didn't really pay attention to it more or a lot until he really brought it to my attention. One thing I always try to leave every conversation with is, okay, well, what is it that I can help you with? I try to leave every conversation with that. It's not that I do it every time. It's almost, I've tried to make it a habit. And I mean it sincerely. It's like, what is it that I can help you with? Is there, like you said, is there a resource? Is there a connection? Is there, I don't know. It doesn't matter what it is, because if I can, I will do it, right? That's the whole point. But when you're trying to build those relationships, once again, it's about the other person. And if you can leave that person with feeling that you care, feeling that they were heard, feeling that you understood or tried to understand through your questions, you'll be surprised at how quickly people will then come back to you, right? Be willing to offer up some help, offer up some resources, We've got some friends that we've built over the years, Greg, that come back into our lives when we need them, right? And they're willing to help, and vice versa if they need help from us. I've got a person that I've helped with building a podcast and helped her with some logos and, she was questioning, how do you do this? How do you do that? And it's like, it's a relationship. I wasn't expecting anything in return. It was just, yes, how can I give? How can I help you? Who knows where that will be in the future, other than just a great relationship, because we have a great, great friendship. She's just a great human. Any thoughts on that too?
Yeah, I was going to say, you beat me to the punch. You were definitely great at, adding that at the end of even our conversation we've had for a couple of years. How can I help you? What do you need help with? Sometimes it's, I'm good. Other times it's, I'll let you know. And other times it's, yeah, let's dive in because I got this issue going on. And I try to do that. I try to think of when I'm having a conversation, like, I got to end it like Randy does, because it's giving value, right? And I don't do it all the time, but I love that aspect that you do. And you're just creating that relational capital, right? That we're talking about of, you're reaching out to people that you might not have spoken to in a couple of years. Like, for example, Manny and I, we hopped on a phone call with somebody from the inner circle that we're talking about. David, he lives in Belize. I'm sure you know who we're talking about, the realtor friend that we have. I hadn't talked to him. Last time I saw him was at an event 2 years ago. And I said, hey, I got a couple questions about, some real estate. Literally hopped on a call the next day. And he was, how can I help you? What do you need help with?
Right.
What can I explain? And just having that relational capital, being in the same room with him and, I'm touring some properties in Belize with him at one point and just honestly getting to know him, right? Like, I wasn't asking him for anything. He wasn't asking for business. And then, 2 years later, he was happy to hop on a phone call and send me links and do all this kind of stuff. And it's just all from being curious and being authentic and building that relationship with him. And 2 years later, yeah, buddy, what can I help you with? It was just like time stood still, and it was the next day. It was really, really cool.
Yeah, and it's not that it's guaranteed that person will come back with open arms to help you, but at the same time, it definitely increases the odds. That's for sure. This same person, I met him in a dinner line at a conference, and once again, just struck up conversation. This is before you and I really communicated together, but yeah, this David, he's fantastic, great human, wealth of knowledge, and just looking to give. That was that was my takeaway from our initial reaction. If I needed some help or had some questions, I guarantee he'd probably hop on a call with me as well. That's what it's all about. You just build that relationship capital. I think you've mentioned that a few times here today. So man, that's really the big takeaway, is focusing on giving first. Once again, it sounds simple, but if you're not in the habit of doing it, like I said, that was not modeled for me growing up. And so that was a challenge for me to think that was even possible. But once I started to do it, I started to get, once again, the different results, right? So once I started focused on the being, the attitude, right? Making the decision that I was going to start giving first. Then obviously I started doing different things, which then gave me the different result, which just goes back to that last episode we had about the be, do, have, which I knew that's where this would be a great kind of piggyback off of that same theme as well. Any more thoughts on the relationship piece, giving? Just trying to give, trying to add value, right? That's the phrase I like to use, right? Just trying to add value. How can we add value? I say that to you all the time when we're talking about the podcast, as much as I possibly can. It's like, we just need to figure out how can we add more value, right? And we'll see where it goes, but that's where it becomes a lot more fun.
Yeah, I think that's honestly what it comes down to, is just consciously, taking over that subconscious of what am I going to get from this meeting? I'm going to get another client, to the conscious, have that conscious override of, let me go into this meeting and just give and ask them, ask every person I talk to, hey, who's your ideal client? How can I help you land that client? I might know somebody in my phone right now that needs your service, that unless you tell me, they're just going to stay in my phone. So yeah, just leading with that, that attitude of how can I help you, and give. I think that's the main takeaway. And then, things will come back to you, and it's just like putting out the good karma, right? It's the good karma will come back to you.
Yeah. They say that, you give it out and it'll come back tenfold, right? If you keep giving, showing up, adding value, eventually it'll come back to you, and it'll come back in a windfall, meaning it'll be more so than you've ever dreamt or thought possible. So if that challenges your thoughts or your beliefs, I would just challenge and push back a little bit to give it a try. Just the next part or the next relationship, you can get off this episode today. The next person you run into, it could be a family member, it could be a coworker, it could be your neighbor. It could be anybody. Look to add value. Look to ask questions. Ask curious questions. You said that. Just ask curious questions, but then listen. Get to know people's names. I've learned that as well. If you can get good at memorizing people's names, and how I do it is I associate their name with a physical thing. Like, it's going to sound stupid, but like with a rock or with a car. I like cars, right? I'm a car guy. So I'll associate a name or the sound of a name with something like that, which helps me then remember. Or even if I try to relate it back to even what's going on in that moment, like there might be an event going on where I meet this person, and I can I can refer back to those moments to then remember that person's name. That would be another idea, something to kind of keep in mind, that if you can get good at remembering people's names, calling people out by name, people love that. And just really good at giving as much as you possibly can. So Greg, man, I appreciate it. I'm always trying to add value into your life. You're always trying to add value into mine, and I appreciate you showing up. And that's what we're trying to do for you here today, folks, on the Rich Mind Podcast. We're trying to figure out different ways. I'm trying to get better at the craft of podcasting, of delivering messages, about telling stories in different ways. I'm trying to share my experiences that really has changed the trajectory of the Wilson line, the bloodline, right, of moving forward, that's what's super exciting for me, is that it's not just even about me. It's about my family. It's about my future generations. And that's why I love getting on here, hitting record, sharing some of my thoughts, sharing some of the resources that I've gained, with the hopes that you'll take those things and use them in your own life. I really hope that you'll try them out. What I do and how I do it may not work, but I've had some results. I've had some positive results. And so hopefully at least give it a thought, give it a try. And then who knows where that will lead in the future. So, man, Greg, any other thoughts as we wrap this one up here today? This has been a fun conversation as always.
Yeah, no, I think that was a great ending. And I think we tend to end our episodes a lot like that of, hey, give this a try. Give it, just give it a try on your end, and
just give it a try.
Yeah, and see what happens. So I can't, I can't back that statement enough. Give it a try, guys.
Just give it a try. Love it. So folks, if you have any questions, if you have any things that Greg and I can help you with, reach out to us, info@richmind.co. That's an easy way to get in connection with us. We'd be more than happy to try to respond with any resources that we might have. You might have different questions, different challenges that are going on in your life based on the conversations that Greg and I are having. Some things might relate. And you're like, how did you exactly do that? Or it might be a resource that we mentioned that I might not get in the show notes or something like that. I might miss some things, right? Ask. Just ask. You'll be surprised, because I've been surprised that if you just ask in the right way, showing up to add value, how quickly you'll get a response back. And Greg and I will do our best to get back with you as quickly as possibly can with whatever you're needing. And we'll try to help you with that. So info@richmind.co, and let us know what you think. We would greatly appreciate that. Share these episodes with your family and friends. We would greatly appreciate that as well. We're trying to help as many people as we can on their journey, personal development, financial education, trying to get themselves in better positions moving forward in 2025 and beyond. So next time, we're going to talk about a subject that has been, this was a game changer for me. We're going to talk about core wounds. And that might not even, you might just like, core wound, what is that? It sounds like a cut on the arm. Is that whatever? What is that? We're going to find out. That we're going to talk about core wounds in the next episode. This was a game changer for me when this was described and shown to me, and I really gave it some thought. It's one of those things you're going to have to think about. But once you do, and once you put forth that effort, which like we said, just give it a try, I'm telling you, this could be a game changer for you as well. So we look forward to bringing that to you in the next episode. So go out there, focus on being great, have a fantastic day, and Greg and I will look forward to coming back in the next episode again very soon. Until then, bye now.
Thank you for joining us today on the Rich Mind Podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, please like and share it with someone you know. Also, don't forget to subscribe on your favorite platform and never miss an episode. One last thing, don't ever forget that your mind is the first place where wealth is created. Keep dreaming big. Take action, and together, let's build wealth, a legacy, and a life we love.